Hello and welcome to the Tron Church Talking Points podcast. My name is Fraser and I'm here today with Josh Johnston and Paul Brennan, and we're here to continue thinking about the sermons which we heard together on Sunday. Josh, you were preaching in the morning on the second half of this introduction to the book of Judges and the beginning of chapter 2 into the beginning of chapter 3. And then in the evening, Phil Copeland was preaching for us on 2 Kings chapter 5. And I think we'll start just thinking about Judges. And one of the things which struck me as I was listening, or as we were reading the passage even, was there's a number of places in the passage where it speaks about the Lord experiencing emotions, or that's what, it says in, I think, verse 12 that he was provoked to anger. Verse 14, the anger of the Lord was kindled. Verse 18, the Lord was moved to pity. And you also picked up on the fact that God is a jealous God and is jealous for the love and service of his people. What's going on there? What is that communicating about God? And how is it perhaps different to the way in which we might experience these emotions of anger? We're all probably well used to being provoked to anger, but not in the same way as God is. What's going on there?
Yeah, you're getting at what theologians call the doctrine of God's impassibility, which is just that he's without passions. Now, that can be misunderstood in thinking that he then doesn't really feel that he's cold and robotic and mechanistic. And it's not really saying that at all. It's really saying that he's not controlled by or dictated to by anything external to himself. So our feelings can skew how we do things. When something happens from outside of us, it can cause us to feel something that will change our course and direction, and we're affected by that, where God isn't. And so his jealousy, for instance, is a helpful picture of that. His jealousy is not that sort of horrible expression of someone who's distorted and needy and all these sort of things. Rather, his jealousy is one of the expressions of his love, in that it's a settled love. He's not changeable in it. He's utterly committed in his love. He's undivided. His love is unbreakable, unrelenting. Because it is real, deep, profound love, then, when it's spurned, when it's trampled over, then that is, where jealousy rightly comes up. I use the example of, it would be a terribly callous thing for, a husband to kind of shrug nonchalantly at the idea of his wife committing adultery. That's not love. Jealousy is that love burst into true flame, or I quoted a preacher on that. But so his jealousy is it's not dictated to control, but it's part of his full orbed love. But you see similar then in his pity is not suddenly when he sees the plight of his people, he's not suddenly forced into doing something he wouldn't otherwise do. When he raises up judges, when he hears his people at the beginning of Exodus, their cries of distress and despair, it's utterly consistent with who he is. He is the God of mercy, the God of grace, and so he's always acting in accordance with his character. He's not knocked off course by happenings.
And the other thing to think about is just the very nature of language and communication. God accommodates himself to us so that we are able to understand, to a certain extent, what he's like. We can't understand him perfectly because he's God and we're men. He's the creator, we're the creatures. So there's that sort of chasm we can't breach ourselves. And so the language of the Bible is an accommodation. It's putting things in ways that we can grasp and lay hold of. And it's not that we equate what we understand and know by jealousy, because God is not like us. So we can't make that sort of direct connection. When it talks about jealousy, that must be the sort of jealousy that you or I might feel. And there's always a rightness to the jealousy, but often there's not. Whereas God is completely right in his jealousy.
Yeah.
It's a perfect jealousy. There's no tainting of sin in that. So it's the nature of the language as well is important to know.
It's always helpful a little phrase. It's always helpful when thinking about descriptions for God is in what sense. So in what sense is he showing jealousy? In what sense is he showing pity? And that's just playing up exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, that describes him as a rock or a roaring lion. In what sense? It's not literally a rock, is he? But what is it about a rock that's being alluded to here?
And so it actually becomes a really encouraging thing. People might have heard of, well, whether they've heard of the word impassibility or not, they might have heard of that idea that, God does not get about his feelings and think, oh, well, is he just cold and distant and uninterested? But actually, no, it's a good thing, because he's not reactionary, and he's not, oh, this is happening over here, better change plan and do this. And oh, what about this? Oh no, I've just realized that. Or, he is completely in control and is acting in accordance with what has always been his plan and his will. And yeah, as you say, Paul, it's being described and it's unfolding in history in a way which we can understand. And it's, we can kind of relate to it, but also as, God's anger isn't tainted by sin and his jealousy isn't tainted by sin, because he's completely without sin. So it's actually, when you think about it more, a really encouraging doctrine, and a thing to realize that
we can, if we haven't slept well, we've gotten up out of the wrong side of the bed, it's been a frustrating week, that impacts how we relate with people. We can be curt or rude, or all sorts of things play it into how we interact. Not so with God. He never gets out of the wrong side of bed.
No, so it is really encouraging, and it was helpful to see that. Another thing I was just wanting to pick up on, I think we kind of saw it in both passages, actually, in the morning and the evening, this sort of idea of complacency. In the morning, you had in Judges this generation who, under the leadership of Joshua, were faithful, and yet there was complacency, because though in a lot of ways it seemed like it was good and they were being faithful, the next generation was ended up idolatrous, and so there's a problem there. And you helpfully brought out that point that they hadn't been faithful in obeying the command to pass on to the next generation, teach their children. You said that the road to idolatry begins with forgetting the wonders God has done. Forgetting and not passing on means that in a generation that can be gone. And a similar sort of thing, though different, in the evening, you had Gehazi in 2 Kings. In 2 Kings 4, he's the servant of Elisha. Seems like a good guy. He's helping with what Elisha's doing and healing and raising the woman's son and things like that. But he goes completely wrong in this passage. So what is the danger of complacency in the Christian life, and how, as a church and church family, can we help one another to first maybe see it and to stop it or to prevent it?
Yeah, it's a hard thing to notice, isn't it? Because I guess for the Joshua generation, things on the whole looked good. You get a few little warnings of things towards the end of Joshua, but the general picture is pretty positive. And so when things are like that, when things are generally on the surface going well, you can sort of, it's that assumption of faithfulness, and there's an assumed understanding, and actually that assuming can hide the reality. And so we can only observe the externals. We can't see into the human heart. And there are the externals of faithfulness which are important, but they're not the whole thing. So being part of a church, attending and serving, and you can have all those things, and actually at the heart of it, there's not a real love and devotion to the Lord. You're doing it for different reasons, and actually the reality is absent. And I guess that can happen unnoticed, I guess. And so that's why there needs to be that sort of humility of attitude, as that whenever we come together, we are all sitting together under God's word, and we're all coming in humble dependence, and that posture, you can't always see it. So I guess that's the slightly scary thing, actually, isn't it? That a church can maybe function on the surface, but actually there's pride bubbling away, or there's sort of presumption bubbling away, and actually you see that in the next generation, and that's what you see happening here, isn't it? But so I think it's a bit of a warning, isn't it, to churches, to families, to leaders, to men. I think about my own family, and it's not just the external form. There's the reality that needs to be there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting just hearing you talk through, Josh. You say you begin to see that just little nuggets of where things aren't quite so, and that's then picked up at the beginning of Judges, and they become bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think one of the warning signs for complacency, I think, is where there's just the beginnings, the beginning touches of compromise, where lots is going well. This isn't, but everything else is going well. So if there's an area that's not going well, it can be ignored, and that can be true in our own Christian lives. There's a sin that you just don't really want to have to think about and deal with. You're fighting everything else, but that one, I'll just leave that for now. But we know, don't we, that that's going to be the one that grows and warps and corrupts and wreaks havoc. Or in a church, you can think, everything's going wonderfully, but okay, it doesn't really matter that we haven't seen anyone come to faith in the last 5 years, but everything else is going really, really well. Well, that could just be a little hint of
I think I used the idea of compounding, where you compound interest, you can grow your money. It seems small, but actually over time it accumulates. And it's a bit like that in Joshua. There's a sort of compounding of the issue. It seems kind of small and negligible at the start, but actually one tribe doesn't quite clear out the Canaanites, and then another tribe, and before you know it, it's widespread, and you see the fruit of it in Judges. So initially doesn't seem like a big deal, but time and pressure just makes a big difference.
Yeah,
I think that the other that's really helpful. The other sort of Judges answer to this from the past we're looking at for complacency is we ought to have pause for concern and thought if the gospel, the wonders of what has been achieved for us, becomes kind of pat, where it's we can recall it, we know, we can articulate it, we know the bare facts, but it's not really gripping us. It's is there anything else we're looking for more, or because it's that whole point that there was a generation arose that did not know the Lord. It's not that they didn't know about him, like the sons of Eli. They were priests, but they didn't actually, the implications of God's wonderful salvation weren't actually gripping and mastering them. And I think that, because that's what the gospel is. The gospel is events in history and the explanation, the implications of them. Doctrine is events and their explanation, their significance. And if we can recall the events, but actually the significance, the implications of them begin to kind of we're sitting loose to those, then that is going to be the seedbed of ever greater complacency, I think.
Yeah, I think the other thing, Paul, you mentioned the importance of our coming together and all together sitting humbly under the word, and that togetherness is so important as well, isn't it? Because yes, to some extent you could maybe hide and mask bits of your complacency, but if you've got real friends and others, Christian friends that you trust, and they ought to be able to spot where there are issues, and often you can more easily spot in others, or others can more easily see flaws which you're not seeing yourself, and just I'm grateful to people, friends that I've got who would point things out to me, or just times when even if they're wrong, just asking the question or just being willing to have that uncomfortable conversation and saying, like, is everything all right here, or I've noticed this, or just wanted to check in and see everything's okay, and doing that, and being willing to receive it and also being willing to do it both can be painful, but so necessary to help us not to kind of slide into complacency and idolatry and wherever else it leads.
That's helpful in terms of thinking about longevity in a church and with friendships as well, because when folks have known you for 5, 10, 15 years, it becomes a lot more apparent when something is slightly amiss, and so the longer one sticks in a church, the healthier the relationships will be in order to help expose these things.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, the final thing I thought we could maybe just talk about is there's this wonderful example in 2 Kings from this little girl. Phil sort of brought out the impact which she had, and in many ways she seems such an insignificant character and doesn't get much of the glory, it seems, but actually it's really wonderful and really encouraging. So the beginning of the chapter, it says, now the Syrians on one of the raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel. She worked in the service of Naaman's wife, and she said to her mistress, "Would that my Lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." So Paul, how can we take encouragement from this little girl's example of witnessing to her Lord? How can we do that?
Well, it's encouraging, isn't it? It's also quite challenging because we don't know her age, but she's a little girl, so she's not a grown woman. She's not, she's not had theological education other than the education she had from her parents, obviously. But she's not got special degrees or anything. She's not done, 101 apologetics and how to reach the Syrians. But no, she's been plucked from her home. You can barely imagine what that was like. Been taken all the way, left her parents. She's young, taken away from home, and she finds herself working for Naaman's wife. Not what you might think fertile ground for evangelism, but she's in the Lord's sovereignty. That's where she's been placed, and she takes an opportunity when it comes her way. And she's kept her ear to the ground. She knows what's going on. She's aware of Naaman and what's weighing on him, the fact he's got leprosy, and all she says to her mistress is just a dozen words. She suggests, "Why don't you visit? There is a prophet in Samaria. Would your husband not meet him?" And so she's not unpacked the gospel. She's offered an invite to come and meet someone who knows the Lord, and so I think in many ways it's very encouraging, isn't it? That if she can do it, well, we can as well, wherever we've been placed. And we may not think it's the ideal location, the ideal environment for evangelism, but the Lord can use us anywhere. And it may be a simple, have you ever considered finding out the answers? I know someone that can help you. So you don't have to have all the answers yourself. You don't have to have the complete explanation, but you can point people to others, point to church, point to life.
The essence of what the girl says is the Lord's wonderful. He can do wonderful things. Which, if we knew and loved Jesus, we knew that.
And it does take the weight off a little bit when thinking about evangelism, because I think we can't put pressure on ourselves thinking we need to have all the answers and people are going to push back and we need to give a full explanation. It's good to be able to have answers and to give explanations of the gospel, but ultimately, if you're able to say, like, do you want to come to church on Sunday? Church is great and God's great, and I'd love for you to experience some of that and to hear from His word. Like,
Yeah, and we can all say that, I think. We could all say, those words we could all probably do that. But I think actually just to give you confidence that, anyone that's been coming to church for any reasonable length of time, if you find yourself in a conversation talking about Christianity, you're the expert. The person you're talking to probably doesn't know very much at all.
Yeah.
And actually you know more than you realize. And you know the Lord. And that's the essence of it.
Yeah.
You don't need to be able to articulate, every point of doctrine, but you know the Lord and you love his word, and you'll be able to answer more than you realize. So actually remember, you're the expert. You may not feel it, but you know a lot more than they do probably. And maybe they've got into YouTube videos and stuff. You definitely know more than them because they'll be finding all sorts of nonsense on YouTube. But you want to, I think just be confident. And baseline, get along to church.
Yeah.
That's the best place for them. So
I'm recognizing as well that point you raised that, in the Lord's sovereignty, he had brought the girl there, and recognizing that God has put us where he has placed us for a reason, and that,
yeah, we can trust him. I don't suppose that she was praying that this would be the way it would work out.
Yeah.
She found herself in captivity, but the Lord had purposes for her. So again, we can be very confused at our circumstances. We might think, what on earth is the Lord doing? But just being ready and prepared, you never know who you might speak to. You never know what link in the chain you might be for someone coming to faith. You may never know until glory, but be ready.
Circumstances are typically not an obstacle to faithfulness or fruitfulness. They're opportunities.
Yeah. I remember, I think it was, I don't know, when we were listening to a podcast with you, Paul, as apprentices on evangelism. I think it was one of the Jensens, someone in Australia anyway. And
Did I?
It was, whoever it was talking about, as a Christian, in one sense, you're the most important person on your street. In that, you've been placed there, and again, with the numbers in our city as well, the number of people that are believers and regular churchgoers, in human terms, like the people, whether it's your neighbors on your street or your colleagues, whatever, in human terms, you're their best shot at hearing the gospel and recognizing that, and that actually, okay, maybe God has put me in this street or in this job or in this sports club or whatever it might be for a reason. And
it just flips your perspective, doesn't it? Just reminds you of the ultimate things. And in many ways, not to puff us up, but in terms of the fact that we know the Lord, we are probably the most important people on our street, because what's the most important thing for anyone? Well, it's to know the Lord.
Yeah.
And if you're a Christian, you know the Lord.
Yeah.
You can connect people to him.
So, as well as that, the passage gives not just there's opportunity wherever we are, but it also pictures wonderfully the fruit of what's then possible. So Phil pointed out that his flesh was restored like the flesh of a little child, and then he takes the soil back from Israel to where he is, so that he's showing that he's belongs to the people of God now. Well, that's what the opportunity one little girl can produce.
Yeah,
and likewise for us.
Yeah, and we've seen that in recent years, haven't we? When we've seen people who have come to church and come to life and come to faith, and that, well, personally, like that spurs me on to think. I just love that for my friends, or people that I know and love who don't yet know and love the Lord. Seeing people that have come to faith in recent years, you're just like, well, wouldn't it be wonderful if that was true for my friends, and if everyone...
Yeah, it's so encouraging. I've got 2 weddings over the next 2 weekends, and the folk getting married came to faith in the last 3 years in the church. So that's a great joy, isn't it, to see that real fruit of Christian marriage, and it's a joy, isn't it? So just open your eyes and just notice these things. It's, that spurs me on that, yes, the Lord is at work, and he loves nothing more than to save people, and it's a great joy to be part of that.
Amen. Well, we'll leave it there for today. I think next week, Josh, you're in Judges again in the morning. Is that right? What part are we looking at?
We are finishing off chapter 3. Othniel, Ehud and Shamgar. So we've got the grotesque, obese man,
That was always
King Eglon.
one of my favourite stories in Sunday school was Ehud and Eglon.
Yes. It was a family favourite.
Yeah. And in the evening, I believe Phil is again going to be in 2 Kings, presumably in chapter 6, because it comes after chapter 5. But thank you very much for listening, and hope you listen again next week.